My wife said, "I'm teaching our son to call my male best friend daddy. You're never home anyway." I replied, "Whatever's best for him." Then I installed cameras and caught them in our bed when I live streamed it to her family's Thanksgiving dinner. I never thought I'd be one of those guys posting their divorce drama online, but after what happened at Thanksgiving dinner last year, I figure my story might help someone else recognize the red flags I missed. Fair warning, this gets ugly, but sometimes that's what justice looks like. The signs were there for months, years, probably. But working 80-hour weeks as a critical care nurse during a pandemic doesn't exactly sharpen your home life observation skills. Let me back up. My wife Claire, 34I, 36M, met in nursing school 9 years ago. I specialized in emergency critical care. She went into pediatric oncology. We both understood the crazy schedules, the emotional toll, the way this career can consume you. That shared understanding was one of our strongest bonds. 4 years into our marriage, our son Eli was born. Claire took a year off, then returned to work part-time, 3 12-hour shifts per week. I picked up extra shifts to compensate financially. Between her 3 days and my 5, often 6, we relied heavily on my mother for childcare. Enter Keith, 35M. Keith moved to our city in Philadelphia in March 2020, just as the pandemic was beginning. By Thanksgiving 2021, when everything came to a head, he had been integrated into our lives for 20 months, longer than I initially realized, as Claire had been in contact with him for months before telling me he was moving to town. Keith was Claire's best friend from college, who she'd always insisted was gay, her cover story to explain why I shouldn't be concerned about their closeness. I'd heard stories about him over the years, but never met him because he'd been working with Doctors Without Borders in various locations. According to Claire, they'd been inseparable during their undergraduate years before nursing school. When Keith arrived to take an administrative position at Claire's hospital, she was ecstatic. Finally, her platonic soulmate was here. Within weeks, Keith became a fixture in our lives. When my shifts didn't align with Claire's, Keith would often help out with Eli. He'd bring dinner over, take Claire and Eli to the park, be there when I couldn't. I was grateful, honestly. Working in the ICU during COVID had been brutal. This was during the second wave of COVID in late 2020, when vaccines weren't yet widely available and our ICU was still overwhelmed with cases. By Thanksgiving 2021, restrictions had eased enough to allow small family gatherings in Pennsylvania, but many of us healthcare workers were still living in a different reality than everyone else. Unlike many of my colleagues, I hadn't moved out to protect my family because our hospital had implemented strict PPE protocols, and Claire insisted she wasn't concerned about exposure. In retrospect, her eagerness for me to come home despite the risks makes more sense. She wanted to maintain the appearance of normal family life while conducting her affair when I was on night shifts. Coming home to find dinner made and my son happily entertained felt like a blessing. If Keith was giving Claire the emotional support I was too drained to provide, I considered that a good thing. That's what I told myself anyway. The first real alarm bell rang about 3 months into this arrangement. I came home early from a shift, a patient coded and died right at shift change. After the paperwork I couldn't face starting another case. I heard Eli's laughter from the kitchen, along with Claire's voice and Keith's. Rather than interrupt, I paused in the hallway. "Who made this yummy spaghetti?" Claire was saying in her kid voice. "Daddy did." Eli replied gleefully. My heart warmed momentarily until I realized I hadn't made spaghetti in weeks. "That's right," Claire continued. "Daddy Keith makes the best spaghetti, doesn't he?" I stood frozen as my almost 4-year-old son enthusiastically agreed that Daddy Keith was the best cook. I must have made some noise because the conversation stopped. "Dave, you're home early," Claire called out, her voice shifting to a higher register. I walked into the kitchen to find Keith at my stove, wearing an apron I'd never seen before. Claire was sitting with Eli, looking slightly flushed. Keith had the decency to appear uncomfortable. "Hey man, rough day?" he asked, stirring the sauce with my wooden spoon. I ignored him, focusing on Claire. "Can I talk to you upstairs?" Once in our bedroom, I asked her directly. "Why is our son calling Keith Daddy?" She sighed dramatically, as if I were overreacting. "It's not a big deal, Dave. Keith is here more than you are these days. Eli was getting confused. Confused about who his father is. I could feel my blood pressure rising. Don't make this into something it's not, she said. Keith has been a godsend while you're working 24/7. Eli needs a consistent male figure in his life. I'm his father. You're never home anyway, she replied, her tone turning sharp. I'm teaching our son to call my best friend, Daddy. You're never home anyway. I'm trying to give our son stability. Why are you threatened by someone helping us? The conversation deteriorated from there. She accused me of being jealous, insecure, and ungrateful for Keith's help. When I pointed out that encouraging our son to call another man daddy crossed a fundamental boundary, she dismissed it as just a word. Fine, I finally said. Whatever's best for him. I slept in the guest room that night, telling myself I was overreacting. Claire was right. I hadn't been as present as I wanted to be, but something felt deeply wrong. In the months before Keith arrived, I'd noticed changes in Claire's behavior. More secretive phone use, emotional distance, occasional, unexplained irritability. She'd started therapy briefly but stopped, claiming the therapist was judging her. Her drinking had also increased gradually. In retrospect, these were likely signs of the emotional affair beginning before Keith's physical arrival, not just pandemic stress as I'd assumed. The next day, I called out from work, my first sick day in 2 years. After Claire left for her shift, I sat with Eli and gently asked him about Daddy Keith. What came out of my toddler's mouth sent ice through my veins. Daddy Keith sleeps in Mommy's bed when you're at work, he said casually, focused on his toy cars. They have sleepovers and lock the door. Kids say things they don't understand, I told myself. This could be innocent. Maybe Keith crashed on our bed during a movie night while I was working in overnight. But my gut was screaming. I called my mother and asked if she'd noticed anything unusual. Her hesitation told me everything. David, she said slowly, I've tried to hint at this several times, but you've been so exhausted from your ICU shifts that you missed my signals. I've been collecting my own observations, planning to have a serious talk with you once you took some promised time off. You were barely functioning. I was afraid if I dropped this on you while you were working 80-hour weeks during a pandemic, you might break. She went on to describe how Claire had explained Keith's frequent overnight presence. He had too much wine to drive home, the guest room was being used for storage, it was all perfectly innocent. My mother hadn't believed it, but didn't want to add to my burden without concrete evidence. That afternoon, I consulted with an attorney who specialized in family law and privacy issues. He confirmed that in Pennsylvania, as a homeowner, I could legally place cameras in my own home, including the bedroom, especially given my concerns about my son's welfare. He advised me to focus on capturing evidence of them entering the room together and their interactions around Eli, rather than explicit intimate activity. I ordered cameras the next day. Small, discrete devices that connected to my phone. I wasn't proud of this decision, but I needed to know the truth. I installed them 2 days later when Claire took Eli to her parents' place for the day. One in the living room, one in the kitchen, and after significant moral debate, one in our bedroom. I told myself I would check the footage only if Eli mentioned more sleepovers. I didn't have to wait long. The following week, I had 3 consecutive night shifts. On the second night, at around midnight, my phone alerted me to motion in the bedroom. I was actually on a brief break when the alert came through. I stepped into the empty family consultation room, sadly unused during COVID restrictions, to check the notification, expecting to see Eli had gotten out of bed. Instead, there they were, Claire and Keith, in my bed. The bed where Eli had been conceived. The same Keith who was supposedly gay. I watched for approximately 30 seconds, long enough to confirm what was happening, then closed the app, feeling physically ill. I somehow managed to finish my shift, functioning on autopilot. When I got home the next morning, Claire was already at work, and my mother had Eli. Keith's car was nowhere to be seen. I downloaded the footage from all 3 cameras, transferring everything to an encrypted external drive that never left my possession. Following the same privacy protocols we use for sensitive patient information at the hospital, I created a separate, edited compilation of the non-explicit evidence for legal purposes, with timestamps and dates clearly visible. There were multiple videos: the kitchen, the living room couch, our shower. This wasn't a one-time thing. In several clips, they explicitly discussed how I was too overworked and emotionally absent to satisfy her needs. In one particularly painful moment, Keith joked about how he was the real man of the house now. I didn't confront Claire immediately. Instead, I continued gathering evidence. The videos were damning. Beyond the obvious infidelity, they showed Claire and Keith drinking heavily with Eli in the house, Claire bad-mouthing me to our son, and Keith referring to himself as Eli's real daddy repeatedly. One clip captured them discussing their future together. Once Claire finally got rid of Dave. Then came the discovery that truly broke me. Claire had been sloppy with her financial trail, perhaps believing I was too exhausted to notice. While gathering documents as my lawyer suggested, I found our mortgage statement showing late payments despite money leaving our joint account on time. Bank records revealed systematic transfers to an account number I didn't recognize. Nearly $18,000 over 6 months. When I ran a credit check as part of the divorce preparation, I discovered she'd opened a separate credit card I knew nothing about, with significant charges at hotels and restaurants on days I'd been working. Text messages recovered from our shared cloud account revealed she'd been helping Keith make payments on his BMW. She'd deleted them from the inbox, but hadn't emptied the trash folder. 2 days before Thanksgiving, I filed for emergency temporary custody with my evidence. The judge granted a temporary order pending a full hearing, which was scheduled for the following week. This gave me legal standing to take Eli home from the Thanksgiving gathering if necessary. Through all of this, I maintained a facade of normalcy. I adjusted my schedule, came home when expected, and never let on that I knew. Claire seemed to interpret my emotional distance as work stress. Thanksgiving was approaching, and as usual, we were expected at Claire's parents' house. Her entire family would be there: parents, siblings, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. These were people who had welcomed me as a son. People who adored Eli. People who had no idea what Claire and Keith had been doing. The plan came to me during a particularly difficult shift, after losing a 38-year-old patient, a father of 2, to COVID. Life is too short for this, I thought. Too short to waste another day living a lie. I enlisted the help of Claire's youngest brother, Ryan, who had always been more my friend than hers. When I showed him a small sample of the evidence, his disgust was palpable. "What do you need me to do?" he asked without hesitation. The plan was simple but effective. Ryan would ensure the family TV was connected to the Wi-Fi and ready to receive a screen share. He had set everything up in advance, creating a specific guest network with a simple password just for this purpose. He'd tested it that morning to ensure the connection was stable and the streaming would work smoothly. As the family's unofficial tech support person, no one questioned him fiddling with the TV settings before dinner. I would arrive late due to work, and Claire would go ahead with Eli. Keith had already been invited at Claire's insistence. Her family knew him as her dear friend who'd been helping during the pandemic. My lawyer advised that while distributing explicit footage would be legally problematic, sharing the non-intimate evidence with immediate family members who had a legitimate interest in understanding the situation was legally defensible, especially since it was a one-time event rather than broader distribution. On Thanksgiving Day, I texted Claire that I'd been held up but would be there for dinner. She seemed annoyed but unsurprised. Meanwhile, I parked in the neighbor's driveway. Claire's parents, next-door neighbors, are close friends who were away for the holiday and had given me permission to use their space. Their driveway was close enough to get a strong Wi-Fi signal, but hidden from view of anyone arriving at the main house. At exactly 5 p.m., when everyone would be gathered for drinks before dinner, Ryan texted, "Now." I opened my laptop, connected to the smart TV inside, and began streaming the footage. Not the explicit bedroom scenes. I wasn't about to show her elderly grandparents or any children that, but plenty of damning evidence nonetheless. Claire and Keith kissing in the kitchen. Them discussing their relationship and plans for the future. Keith instructing Eli to call him Daddy. Claire laughing about how clueless I was while transferring money to her secret account. Ryan had preemptively set up the TV for screen mirroring, and disabled the connection notifications under the guise of wanting to show family photos later. He also made sure to have the remote in hand to quickly adjust volume when the stream began. Ryan later described the scene. Claire's mother dropping a glass of wine. Her father standing up so abruptly he knocked over his chair. Keith attempting to leave and being physically blocked by Claire's brothers. And Claire herself, frantically trying to turn off the TV as her carefully constructed image crumbled around her. I waited 5 minutes, then walked in, still in my scrubs. The silence was absolute. All eyes turned to me, some with shock, others with emerging anger, none directed at me. "Sorry I'm late," I said calmly. "I see you've all been catching up on current events." Claire stood frozen by the TV, face drained of color. Keith was cornered by the bar cart, looking terrified as Claire's brothers loomed over him. "Dave," Claire's father spoke first, his voice shaking. "What is this?" "This is why I'm filing for divorce," I replied, "and full custody of Eli." I walked over to where Eli was playing with his cousins in an adjacent room, blissfully unaware of the adult drama. I knelt down and hugged him tightly. "I need to take Eli home now," I announced, picking up my son. "His things are packed in my car. I don't think we'll be staying for dinner." Claire finally found her voice. "You can't just take him. That's my son." Her own mother turned on her. "Be quiet, Claire. You've done enough." I pulled out my phone where I had documented the temporary custody order, prepared to show it if necessary. "I have temporary custody, Claire. We'll discuss visitation through our lawyers." As I carried Eli out, her father followed me to the door. This man who had treated me like a son for years put his hand on my shoulder. "We're on your side," he said quietly. "Whatever you need." While Claire's parents and brothers were firmly in my corner, her sister initially tried to mediate, suggesting Claire deserved a chance to explain. Her elderly grandmother also struggled with the situation, torn between her disgust at Claire's behavior and her instinct to support her granddaughter. Over time, Claire's continued lies and refusal to take responsibility alienated even these last supporters. The aftermath was both easier and harder than I'd anticipated. Easier because Claire's family rallied around Eli and me, providing statements to the court about what they'd witnessed and heard. Harder because divorce and custody battles are brutal, even with clear evidence. The legal process took 8 grueling months, which my lawyer said was actually expedited given the clear evidence. The initial emergency custody order was granted quickly, but the final divorce and permanent custody arrangement weren't finalized until this past summer. Claire tried everything, claiming the videos were illegal. They weren't, as my lawyer had confirmed before I installed them, saying I was unstable from PTSD due to COVID deaths. Ironic given the drinking captured on video. Even suggesting Keith was just a friend who'd been misunderstood by a toddler. The judge wasn't impressed. The financial evidence was particularly damning. Courts take a dim view of emptying children's college funds to pay for a lover's car payments. I was awarded primary custody, with Claire granted supervised visitation until she completed parenting classes and therapy. Our house was sold, with my portion of the proceeds going into a secured account for Eli's future. Claire was ordered to repay the money she'd diverted, with interest. Keith disappeared from the picture entirely once the free money dried up. Last I heard, he'd moved across the country. Claire eventually got a new job at a different hospital. While her direct colleagues maintained professional interactions, the trust essential to the pediatric oncology team had been broken. When positions opened in other departments, she was passed over repeatedly. Hospital administration never formally acknowledged the situation, but her supervisor later told me they couldn't risk placing her with vulnerable families, given her demonstrated lack of judgment. As for Eli and me, we moved into a new place closer to my mother, who's been an incredible support. I switched to a role with more regular hours, still in critical care, but on a fixed schedule that gives me more time with my son. He's adjusted better than I could have hoped, though he occasionally asks about his mother. We have video calls during her scheduled times, and the supervised visits have been going well enough. It's been just over a year since that Thanksgiving. Claire's family still includes Eli and me in all holiday gatherings. They've made it clear that we remain family, regardless of Claire's actions. She's invited separately, on different days. Sometimes I wonder if the public exposure was too harsh. But then I remember how they planned to cut me out of my son's life. How they were actively teaching him to call another man daddy, while I was working myself to exhaustion to support them. How they laughed about it. How they stole from our child's future. No, I don't regret the live stream. Some betrayals are so profound they deserve to be witnessed. Last night, as I was tucking Eli into bed, he looked up at me and said, "You're my real daddy." 4 simple words that made every difficult moment worthwhile. If you're staying in a relationship for your child's sake, remember that kids need parents who model integrity and self-respect. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who don't value you and take your children with you. Edit. Appreciate the awards, but maybe donate to your local children's hospital instead? Also, since some folks are asking, 1. Yes, lawyers cleared me to post this now that everything's settled. 2. No, I don't regret anything. 3. Yes, my son is thriving and calls Med Daddy now. A few clarifications. Since this post has blown up more than I expected, let me address some common questions. 1. Yes, the cameras were legal. I owned the home, installed them in common areas, and yes, my bedroom counts as my private space, and did so out of concern for my child's welfare after hearing concerning statements from him. My lawyer vetted this thoroughly before we used anything in court. 2. No, I didn't send actual sex tapes to her family's TV. I'm not a monster. I showed footage of them kissing, discussing their relationship, planning their future, and the Daddy Keith coaching sessions. That was damning enough. 3. Keith was never actually gay. That was Claire's cover story to explain why I shouldn't be concerned about their closeness. Just another lie in the tangled web. 4. For those suggesting I should have confronted Claire privately first, I tried that approach after the daddy incident. She gaslighted me and made me feel like I was the problem. When someone is willing to help your child erase you, they don't deserve the courtesy of a private confrontation. 5. Claire's drinking increased dramatically during Keith's time in our lives. The videos showed them regularly consuming alcohol when responsible for Eli, sometimes starting as early as noon. This became another significant factor in the custody decision. 6. Some have asked if I feel bad about her losing her job. Honestly, no. She was a pediatric oncology nurse, a position requiring impeccable ethics and judgment. Her choices demonstrated neither.